Welcome back. In this episode of my Lightroom Classic workshop, we're going to be covering saving and exporting. Now, if you've been following and watching this series all along, then you know how to do some development of your images. You know how to deal with tones and color, and you even know how to do masking inside of Lightroom Classic. But now what? How do you share them? This episode is all about getting your images out of your Lightroom Classic catalog and onto your walls or onto social media. Saving and exporting in Lightroom Classic coming up. Hi, I'm Terry Vanderheide, professional photographer, and I'm teaching you Lightroom Classic from the very beginning. We're at episode 9 in our beginner's workshop on Lightroom Classic. Exporting is this week's topic. Let's learn how to get your images out of your Lightroom catalog so others can enjoy them. Let's get into it. All right, we're back inside of Lightroom Classic, that same first catalog we've been working on. So let's grab an image down here. And we're going to do a little bit of work. Let's just take this. And first thing we do is, of course, we're going to make a virtual copy. And that's for learning purposes. Plus, it's a way that we can take our image and do a few different things to it and then see how we like it compared to the way we started. So we took this original image, and you can see here that we now have 2. And if you zoom in, you can see that this one has a little corner. That means it's a virtual copy. So we're going to work on this and do a little bit of work on it. So let's go into develop, and let's just bring up the exposure, and we'll bring up the shadows, and we'll take down the highlights a little bit, and we'll take our saturation and bring it up since we know it's warm tones. So that's the difference between these two. That's our original, and that's we just did a little bit of work on this one right here. So one of the things that I get a question on all the time is, okay, I've done this work on it. How do I save something in Lightroom? Well, this is really simple. When you want to save something, you go up to, go up anywhere. It saves it automatically. It saves everything you do as you go. So you never have to worry about saving your images. Now, another question I get a lot on virtual copies is, how much space can I do with, how much space does virtual copies take up? And the real bottom line with virtual copies is consider it to be just like a list of instructions. Now, yes, you visually get to see what it is, but consider it just a list of instructions. So it doesn't really take up that much space to add virtual copies. So I do it all the time, and you ought to try it too. And the other question I get is, can you export and save your virtual copy? It is exactly like a regular image because, again, it's instructions. It's telling Lightroom Classic that these are the things we want you to do to this image. So let's say we want to take this image and we want to export it. We want to save this. We want to share it with somebody. So let's go ahead and right-click in the middle of the image and go down here to export. And we're going to go up here and we'll click the first one that's export. So this brings up this dialog box. This is our export dialog box. And we can see here that we're going to export it here to the hard drive. You could obviously export it to email or something else, but I generally always do it to the hard drive because I want to maybe go back to it. So then here is it export to a specific folder. So you can tell it what folder you want to do, or you can send it to the desktop. You can put it in some of these that are already pre-made for you, but we're just going to leave it on specific folder. And if when you open yours up, if it's not on specific folder, then go ahead and change it to that. And down here is the actual map of how to get to where it is we're going to put it. So if we go over here to choose, we're going to choose export files. So this is just a folder that I put on my desktop, export files, and we'll choose that. And then you can see the little map here. It says users, my name, desktop, export files. That's the folder that's in, so you can find out exactly where it's at. Now, you can also put it in a subfolder if you wanted to. You clicked on this, and then you can title your export subfolder. So there would be a folder inside of that folder, depending on what you want to do. Or if you want to do any of these other things, add it to the catalog or anything in particular that you want to do to this image right before you're exporting it. But we'll get into all that in just a little bit. So first off, we're picking our export location, where that location goes to. And so we've chosen now we're going to export files. File naming. In this next section, now, by the way, these are little triangle things that usually inside of Lightroom Classic, you're going to have all these little drop-down menus that you can work with as you're exporting. So we'll go through these. So we'll use all the ones that are the most useful as we go through a typical export. So file naming. So file naming is a little bit tricky because if you start renaming your files on export, it's not going to be the same name that's going to be inside of your Lightroom Classic. So for instance, if you take a file and you give it a new name and then you send it to somebody and they say, oh, I want to do some changes to that image, then they're going to tell you, oh, this is the file we want. Well, you don't know that's the name of the file inside of Lightroom Classic, say 2 months from now, because you exported and put a new name to it. So on something like that, you may not want to change the name of your file, because that way your customer or whoever your person is that wants to get say a second image of that, they'll be able to reference the exact title of your file, and then you can find it much easier. However, if you do want to rename it, you can click on this and go to rename. So there's a lot of different varieties of things you can do. You can create a custom name for a rename. And what I do if I ever do rename things is I add a custom name with the original file, because again, I want to be able to find that image down the road, right? When somebody requests it, and that always happens, somebody will request an image that you've renamed. So let's say we just put in whatever text we want to put in here. So I've got TV 510, and you can see here that the example is TV 510 and then 9927 NEF. Okay, so this gives you this. When I go to rename this, it's going to rename it with that name. So if I don't rename it, it's going to just come with the name that's outside of the camera, inside the camera rather. And this is Z9Z, Z9Z, 9927. That's what's inside. That's what the camera generates. But if I rename it, then this is going to add this little part on top, and then it's going to keep the numbers of what that file number is. So I'm telling Lightroom Classic, I'm going to give it a custom name, but I want you to keep that original file number. Okay, so that's how that is done. You can also rename it in sequence. You can do all these different varieties of renames, and that's entirely up to you, however you want to do it. But easily enough, I want to always keep that name so I can go back to it. So if a customer got this image, they're going to say, oh, I want to look at TV 510. Well, maybe I got tons of things like that. And they say the rest of the number, 9927. Well, it's a simple process for me to go into my catalog and look up 9927. So this is the file renaming as you export. So the next one's video. We're not dealing with video in this. File settings. So in your file settings, you can tell Lightroom Classic to export images at whatever file you'd like. So let's say, for instance, it's going to go to social media. So in social media, you're going to probably use a JPEG. So let's go put it on JPEG. And then this opens up a dialog box that gives you other options of things that you can do with this. You can change the quality of the JPEG. You can change the color space of the JPEG. And you can limit the file size to a certain size. So depending on what you're doing, that's a way that you can create exactly what you're looking for. But this is the file settings, how you do this. So let's go ahead and export this. We're just going to do these two things. We're going to name it with this name, and we're going to export as a JPEG. So we got this file, we're exporting as a JPEG. And then we just hit the word export. And it takes a second. You can see up here a little thermometer thinks about it, and boom, that's done. This isn't a super fast computer, but exporting really doesn't take generally a lot of time. So let's go to my desktop, and we go into export files, and we look here and we go into export files folder, and we see there it is, TV 510. There's that image. You can see it's a little lighter than that last one, right? So there's our file, and it's a JPEG. So let's go back into Lightroom real quick, and we're going to export again. And now what we're going to do is we're going to change the output of this, right? Let's change the output to, let's go to original. Now what original does is that's going to send out the original file. So this should be a .nef file when we're done. So let's go ahead and take a look. We'll hit export. And we'll go to our desktop. And sure enough, this is the original JPEG, and then this is our raw file with this XMP file along with it. Why is that important? The XMP file is the information that we told Lightroom to make the changes to that image, right? So this is that list of information. It doesn't come up as an image. You can kind of see the difference too. If we look at this original, this one's all light, and this one is very similar to the way we shot it, right? Because that is the way we shot it. Without this little list of rules, list of information of how to make changes to that image, then it's not going to be able to do it, right? This is the instruction sheet right here. So whenever you want to export, and this comes into, this is a big solve. I get this all the time. People have started their catalog. They didn't do the catalog quite right. They started watching my episodes and says, you know what? I want to redo my catalog. How do I do this? How do I get my images into my new catalog? Well, a real simple way, and it's, you know, it's a little difficult in terms of time, but in terms of how to do it, it's super easy. You would just export all of the files in your current catalog and export them as original. So when you export them as original, they're going to come, each one is going to have their own XMP file that's going to follow along with it. So if you've made any changes to those images over the years, all those changes will then follow it along and give you that same information. So it's a really cool way that you can go through and take all of your images out of Lightroom and start a brand new catalog. If you want to start a brand new catalog, you can just export all the old images, but export them as original. That's super important. So as we right click, go to export. So again, we've got the custom name. Let's go ahead and turn that custom name off for just a few. And we have original here. We also have other things that you can export as. Obviously, JPEG is going to be the most popular. You can export as a PSD, but you haven't done anything unless it's not a PSD. Haven't done anything to it. TIFF, PNG, and DNG. Now, a DNG is a raw file, but that's like a universal raw file. So, like I shoot Nikon, so mine are going to be NEF. If you shot Canon, you would have CR2 files. But if you wanted to convert it to a DNG, then you would have just a generic file. So let's go ahead and export that. And let's go check out our folder here. And sure enough, we've got a DNG file. And that's going to send out the actual DNG file that's created. And notice the difference here. See how that's a little darker than our original one that we made our changes on? And that's because you're telling Lightroom to give us an original DNG, right? This one has that list of instructions, which is great because we can now, when I bring this into a file, in fact, let's just do that. Let's go ahead and drag this. Let's see how this works. So when I brought this directly into Camera Raw or Photoshop, because if you bring a raw image into Photoshop, it's going to open up Camera Raw first. Camera Raw, as you know, is going to be similar to Lightroom Classic in terms of all the different functions. But see that lighter image? That's because it took all that information that we brought with it and wanted to tell you to make those changes on that image. So let's try this. Let's close this out real quick like. And let's go back in here to our folder. And we're going to take this DNG image and drag it into Photoshop. And that's going to open up. See, this brought in that same information, but now that information is buried inside the file. You can come back in here and you can change whatever changes you want to make to that image. Real super simple, right? It takes all those images with it. Now let's go do this one more time. Let's go to our original and we're going to export that. And we'll export that either as a DNG or as an original. So let's go ahead and export it as original. And we're just going to export it like that. Doesn't take but a second when you're exporting originals. This is the DNG. This is the original with its XMP file. This is the one that we changed the name in its XMP file. So let's go ahead and drag this one over into Photoshop. Open it in Camera Raw. And see, this didn't bring in any changes because that was that original. We didn't have any changes to it. So its information was don't do anything to that file. So as you export an image and you're exporting as original, you can export it with all of your information, all the work you've done on it. You can export it with all that information, move it into another catalog, share it with somebody who has the ability to go into Camera Raw or Lightroom Classic to actually manipulate the images, and you can share them exactly as you have them in Lightroom Classic. So it's pretty cool. Next, we're going to talk a little bit more about some streamlining of your exporting. If you're enjoying this content, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that bell icon so you'll be notified when my next video is released. I always read and respond to all the comments, so feel free to leave a question or a suggestion. I'll read it and I'll get back to you. Also, if you'd like to reach me directly, use my email, terry@imagelight.com, and I'll be happy to answer your questions that way, put you on my mailing list, so then I'll notify you of my next video when it releases. Thanks. So now we know a little bit about doing our exporting. So let's streamline our system a little bit more. So let's take a new image here, and we'll brighten that up a little bit. And now we're going to go to export. And on here, we're going to say, okay, let's go ahead and we'll change it, make a new folder. So we come up to the export, we're going to go to choose, and we're just going to go to new folder, and we'll call this birds. And now we're going to export inside of birds. And instead of doing the original, you're going to do that from time to time, but mostly you're going to do JPEGs. So let's do a JPEG here, and we're going to go ahead and send that to that folder. Go ahead and export it. See, it doesn't take too long. And let's go in and check it. Go to the desktop. We see our folder for birds. And inside is our JPEG of the bird. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back into Lightroom. And let's make a couple of changes to this. Let's go ahead and hit export. And now what we're going to do is we're going to change how we want this to export. We want to change the size of this when we're exporting it. So we come down to image sizing. And image sizing allows us to resize the image that we're doing. So let's go ahead and hit resize. And we want this image to be, we're going to be sending it to social media, right? So if you send a really big, like one of these big Nikon Z9 files or a Leica file or something like that over as a JPEG, it's going to be too big for your social media. You need to make it a little bit smaller. So let's just take, and we'll say this 2,500 pixels. And we can have the ability here to say, oh, we want the width and the height or the dimensions, whatever. I just simply put it on long edge. So that means the longest edge of my file is going to be 2,500 pixels. The resolution 72, that's pretty common. And so now we're going to export that. Now it's asking me, hey, there's already a file like that in this folder. Do you want to override it or do you want to use a unique number? So in this case, we're going to use a unique number because we want to show them both. So let's go ahead and hit that. And then Lightroom will actually make you a new number. So let's go to export files, go into birds. So as we open up birds, we can see here that we've got the two files, right? This is the unique number it added a -2 to it. But I want you to see something here that's pretty slick. This is our original that we just sent the first JPEG at full size. You can see that says here the JPEG image is 27.9 megs. And if we come over here to the one we just sent that we reduced the size, remember we said long side 2,500 pixels? Well, look at this. It's only 1.7 megs. So that's quite a bit smaller. It's going to upload quite a bit faster. And your Facebooks and things like that, Instagram, are not going to have a deal where you can, make it could be too big and it's going to be really slow loading. Just do a Google search to say, what's the best size for an Instagram image, or what's the best size for a Facebook image? And it'll tell you, and then you can put that in on your export. So one of the cool things about this as we go along, so here's another image that's slightly different. Let's say we wanted to export this one. Well, we can right click, go down to export, and just go export with previous. So what that's going to do is not going to open up the dialog box. It's just going to simply export it. So let's go in and we'll take a look. Go into birds. And sure enough, here's the new file. It's got a new file number, right? So this was our one that we did that was reduced size, and that was the last one we did. And so then we did this one, and it too is going to be a reduced size. So the size on this is going to be small rather than a large, because if you recall, we told it to change that size before we moved on. So let's go back in here, right click, go to export. This will bring up the dialog box. Now, what's really slick in here is, let's say we like this. We're going to export. We want to do all of our Instagram images at 2500 on the long side. So what we're going to come over here, we're going to add that as a preset. So let's go ahead and add, and we're going to call it Instagram. So we'll hit create, and see that over there, that's going to be how we actually would want to export our images. It's going to be a JPEG. It's going to be sized to 2500. So let's go ahead and take this off. Let's change this to original. And now what we're going to do is we're going to, let's cancel that. Actually, before we cancel it, let's go ahead and sit done rather. Now let's go to a new image. And let's go to export. Now, as we go to export, this setup is original, right? But let's say we wanted to, this is something we wanted just like all our Instagrams. Well, you come over here and you click on that, and look what Lightroom does. It takes all those parameters that you had to long edge, 2500, 72 DPI, and now we can export this, and it's going to be the exact size for what we want for our Instagram images. So you can do this as you go, to create whatever kind of exports you want. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's take a new image, and let's say this is an image that we want to make nice and large, right? We're going to make a nice print out of this. So a couple things that you want to do. If you go into cropping, we have the original crop ability over here. So let's just say, for instance, we want to make this a 8.5 by 11. So we know that that's the crop size, and we'll just crop this in a little bit. Now our printer generally is going to be taking JPEGs, right? Whether you outsource printing online, or if you print to an actual printer, it's probably best going to be printed from a JPEG. So let's go ahead and go export. Now what we want to do on this export is we want this to be the top quality, right? So we don't want to resize this thing at all. We want this as big as it possibly can be. And our resolution here says 72. We don't want that either. We want this at 300, because we know that our printer is going to print at 300. So we like how this is set up. This is going to export a JPEG at 300 DPI. And so now we're going to add this, and we're just going to make a new process, and we're going to call this to print. Hit create. So now we have a different parameter over here that we can go to, a real quick point where we can click on it and make those changes. So let's go ahead and do an export. Now let's go down here and see what we got. So this is an export that we did that was an Instagram style in terms of size. And then this is one that we did that was going to be for printing. In this particular case, it's going to be an 8.5 by 11. So we can see the file size is much larger because we are going to print to that. It's going to be at 300 DPI. So when we send this file to our printer, whether it's a printer on our desk or a printer online or some printer lab, they're going to want that sized to the size of the image that you want, and you're going to want it at 300 DPI. So this is also that if you're going to send an image to a magazine that's going to be printed in a magazine, 300 DPI, you're going to want to change that. So as we go through this, we come back to exporting. We can click in here and go to, let's go to a new image here. And let's go to export. We see that we have the option now real quick, like, oh, I want to send this to Instagram. I just click on that and you can see that it changes everything that we want. If I wanted to go to print, we click on that and then it changes it, the resolution to 300. Super convenient to be able to export images like that. All right, so let's say we want to export a few images, right? So let's go ahead and click on it. We'll sample a couple of images. We'll click, we're just holding down the command key and clicking some random images here. And you can also see here, this has got that little turned up corner. That means that's a virtual copy. This is another image, and this is yet another image. So it doesn't matter if you want to export virtual copies, just go for it. It'll come out great. So now we're going to right click, go to export, bring up our export dialog box. So where we want to put these, let's go ahead and choose that we want to choose these to go into a new folder. So let's go ahead and make a new folder, and we'll call this, cleverly, we'll call it new. So now we have a new folder in here that we're going to export to, and we're going to choose that. And you can see here that it is going into the new folder. Now what we're going to do is we like how this is all resized because these are going to go for Instagram. And watch what happens here. So when we come over here to Instagram, when we click this, look at that. It switches it back to birds, right? Because this thinks it wants to send all those images into the birds file the way we originally set this up. So you got to be a little cautious of how you want to do this. So what I'll usually do is I'll create a folder that's all Instagram folder. And everything that I do in Instagram is going to go into that folder. And that's how I set that up. So let's go ahead and take this one and we're going to remove it. And we're going to make a new folder over here. And we'll just put this in export files. And we're just going to call this Insta. That's going to be our Instagram folder going forward. We'll choose that. And what we want in there is we want this image to be sized correctly, right? We like all that. And everything that's going to go in Insta is going to go there. So now we come over here and we do add, and we'll call this Instagram. And create. So now we have our new Instagram thing. So this is going to always go into the Insta folder, and no matter what we do, right? So let's go ahead and click done. Now let's go ahead and grab those 3 images. Go to export. And we're going to export those images over into Instagram. And we'll hit export. Takes a few seconds to do a few, but not a lot of time really. Check this out. Come in here. We see now we have our images that are all going to go to Instagram. So in the future, as you're working, and let's say you come across an image, let's take this image for instance, and we're going to export that, and we're going to export that as a print. So, or actually, let's do this. We're going to resize that. There's going to be no resize. We're going to go, let's just make it to print. So 300 DPI. And look where it's putting it. It's putting it in birds because that's how we originally had set it up. So let's go ahead and choose, and we'll just put that into the main file here. And we'll hit export. And again, let's go on in here. And there's that file right there in our main file. So now we come into Lightroom again, and we're going to, let's take a new image that we're going to export. We want to export this to Instagram. Export. we click Instagram over here, and what does it do? It changes the file, the folder where it's headed. So it's going to put it in that one folder where we want all our Instagram images. It's going to make it a JPEG, and it's going to do the long edge at 2500 DPI. So the resolution is set at 72 as well. So when we click export, then we know that that file is just going to go zip right over to our Instagram folder. And when we open it up, can look in here. And of course, we have our fourth image here that's been added. So this is the basics for doing your exports. You're going to take an image, and it doesn't matter what kind of image it is. You can export it as an original. So like, let's say if you're going to be rebuilding a new catalog, you want all of your information and of work that you've done on those files, export as original. If you want to export a JPEG to share or to make a print, you can send it as a big size for a print, or you can have a smaller size for something that's like social media. Great way to export. This is the whole idea of Lightroom. Put your images in, do your work on your images, and then get them out so you can share them with other people. All right, see you next time.